Hey, everybody. It's Razib with conversation number 34, and I'm here with Josiah Neely, my usual compatriot. No guest today, so we're gonna,
That's
you
right.
know, be a little bit more freewheeling. Do you have anything you want to talk about initially, Josiah?
Well, I there's a couple of in the news type things that I think we should discuss. But one thing I thought that might be worth talking about is the other night you and Rod Dreher, the writer, he has a new documentary that's coming out based on one of his books, Live Not by Lies, and he gave a little talk at the University of Austin. They showed a clip from the documentary, and we were both there. So I thought, if you had any thoughts on that, that would be something that we could talk about. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
I,
So I've never met Rod before. Just for context for people who don't know him, I think most of the listeners will have some knowledge of him, but he's a blogger, and he's been on the scene for over 20 years. I remember actually he wrote about something about 9/11 on National Review's like website on 9/11 or around 9/11. It was like 9/11, 9/12. I think that was the first. I think I'd read some stuff by him before. And he came out with Crunchy Cons, which is kind of you don't I mean, basically, like 25 years ago, I would say, conservative movement, republicanism was very, very libertarian, actually somewhat different than now. Um, and Crunchy Cons was this idea that, you could be more like small is beautiful and, not be into these just economic, neoliberal market growth at all costs. Tended to be more oriented towards conservatives that are like religious, maybe Catholic. Rod is Eastern Orthodox. He was Catholic at the time, and it had some connection. It was like there were like these groups people call paleo conservatives that I was pretty tight with actually. And I'm still friendly with them now, but these terms don't matter as much now in the Trump era. But like
oh,
he was not a paleo conservative, but he aligned with them in some ways. So it was kind of he had kind of a mixed political profile, and he left National Review eventually to go work for Dallas, like Morning News or
California.
whatever. I don't remember what it was, but there were conflicts between him and people like Jonah Goldberg, who are more traditional libertarian conservatives on economics, I remember. And, they gave some really mixed reviews, even at National Review, to Crunchy Cons. Eventually, he wrote more on religion. He worked in the Catholic Church, sexual abuse scandal. He left Catholicism because of that and became Eastern Orthodox. And, he's been Orthodox. When Rod converted to Eastern Orthodoxy, I think it was 2007. And, there were a lot of people who said, "Oh, this guy's gonna convert to another religion," because he grew up Methodist, was an atheist for a little while, eventually kinda became Catholic, became a very serious Catholic, then he converted to Orthodoxy, and, he is conservative politically, but, he leads a kind of peripatetic lifestyle. He lives in Hungary right now, in Budapest, and, he moved from New York to Dallas to Philly, and then back to, I forget
Louisiana.
the town. Yeah, what town was it, Louisiana? Do you
I don't
remember?
know. It's a small. I think it's near Baton Rouge. I think
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
a
Yeah, yeah,
small
yeah.
town.
It's a small town, and that's where he grew up, it's where his family is, and it was to reconnect with family in a lot of ways, but the sad thing is, he has talked about how it didn't work out. He wrote a book about his former or I mean, his late sister. She died of cancer, and just, like, how she lived in that small town, even though she, in many ways, she could have been more professionally successful than Rod if she had wanted to. That's basically his story. But, she wanted to stay in the small town with the people she knew and all that stuff. But the flip side is, he hasn't like been super explicit about it, but he's basically indicated, small towns can be very parochial. And he had left, and he brought, his now ex-wife, was not from that town, and so he brought an outsider, and it was a lot more difficult, than, he had thought, and, eventually, he got a divorce, like, he's been public about that. He lives in Hungary right now, in Budapest, where he has connections to the Danube Institute and other people like that, and, so he's bounced around a lot. He writes an incredible amount, and he is one of the old school bloggers that continues to do what he was doing. 20 years ago. He was the American Conservative for a long time, and they just like let him do whatever he wanted to do. And then eventually, uh, now he's at Substack. He's doing very well. It's kind of natural for him. And yeah, he's a fun guy. He is, a religious Eastern Orthodox social conservative, like in reality and on paper, but he does like to enjoy life and eat and have fun and drink. So, I think like he was a hit with our group here in Austin. He was like learned a lot. He's a good listener, and also he said something in his talk, which I think is actually like super important, and I think a lot of us need to just always remember this. He profiled a Czech family. They're religious Catholics that were dissidents, and they were associated with Václav Havel in that circle. Havel himself was an atheist. A lot of the people that these Czech Catholic family associated with were hippies. They were not religious, but they all shared. You know, they were dissidents from the communist regime. They were not conformists. And what Rod said during the talk was like, you just have to be careful about judging people based on, whether they're like you or not like you or even share your values, because, all that matters when you're a dissident is courage. And if you have courage, that's enough. And I think that that's really, it's a point well taken with a lot of people that don't, we don't live in a totalitarian government system, at least yet.
Yeah.
But there is a sort of soft cultural totalitarianism that did emerge, I think, during the awakening. And there are people who basically wrote like they were like hostage. That it's like it was like they were being held hostage, and they wrote a note. I mean, people
Right.
were psychologically dominated by the culture around 2020 in particular, and there was a lot of people who just caved and conceded, even though in their hearts they didn't agree with that. So they lacked courage. They're not bad people, but they lacked courage. And there's other people, they're just like no, and like it's really hard to predict who's just going to say no, and maybe even risk their livelihood, their family, and all these other things. Like you don't know, and I think that was one of Rod's points, along with many that were well taken.
Yeah. I mean, you say Rod's an interesting character in his own right. He sort of reminds me a bit. He's sort of a throwback to maybe an earlier generation of literary figure where their life and their experience, like they're writing books about whatever, but their life and their experiences are kind of like part of the package, like Norman Mailer or Gordon whoever, um, John Updike, because he has like he's very like let it all hang out, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah. What I was gonna say as you're talking, is like, and I'll let you continue, but like Rod Dreher does not have a problem with being authentic, for good or ill.
right, 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 yeah, exactly. And so he's kind of, I mean, he's reinvented himself. There's a trajectory to it, but he's each book is kind of like builds on, but also overturns the prior one,
Yeah.
and you
Or
know,
attacks. Like let me list the
right,
books really quickly for the listener, because like not everyone might know his oeuvre as well. 2006 Crunchy Cons: How Birkenstock Burkeans, Gun Loving Organic Gardeners, Evangelical Free Range Farmers, Hip homeschooling mamas, right-wing nature lovers, and their diverse tribe of countercultural conservatives plan to save America, or at least the Republican Party. The Little Way of Ruthie Lemming, a Southern Girl, a Small Town, and the Secret of the Good Life. This is 2013. 2015, How Dante Can Save Your Life, the life-shading wisdom of history's greatest poem. Just some context, I don't know all the details, but he did go through some serious depression, and partly related to he had some sort of illness. I forget what it was, some sort of autoimmune thing, and also like moving to that town. The Benedict Option, 2017. Strategy for Christians in a Post-Christian Nation. Live Not by Lies, uh, which is a manual for Christian dissidents. And then 2025, Living in Wonder: Finding Mystery and Meaning in a Secular Age. That's not out yet. It will be out. I think it's still
April 2nd.
okay. Yeah, yeah. So it's very close. So anyway, a guy writes a lot. And more respect to him. Like we haven't written books. We're out here gabbing and writing and doing things, but he has the ability to kind of put. I mean, we had Ross Douthat on. He and Ross are similar in that way, you know? They're just like cranking out the books, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and no shade on Ross, as you know, I'm a big Ross fan, but Rod, I think, has been more successful in terms of like the Benedict option. That's a kind of a reference point in a lot of religious conservative communities. They talk about, Benedict like there's other books about Benedict option that he had nothing to do with, and people talk about, the X option, the Y option, or whatever. So that kind of seized the public imagination um, in a way that is not typical, for most writers. And it does seem to be, I'm not going to give away any juice about like book sales or whatever, but he seems to be. I mean, it's like, his books move. His books move in a way
Yeah,
that is not true
he
for like
he
non.
told us it was pretty eyebrow raising for a lot of people, like,
Yeah,
people, you know.
yeah. In a way, it's just like atypical for like a nonprofit. I mean, a nonfiction. Kind of like heady book or whatever, right? So anyway, so that's good. Live Not My Lies. I read it. I do think it's a very it was a very peak wokeness book. I think it came out in 2020. Um and it is about like these parallels between because I guess the inspiration of the book was he kept talking to people who had grown up under communism who were saying that what was going on with like wokeness and all this stuff, with cancel culture, all that stuff, reminded them of the old, you know, Iron Curtain communist system in a way, right? So there's a lot of parallels about that, which I think it gets some pushback because we don't have gulags here, so it's a different
Mhm,
system, which I think in some ways, I mean, this is a question I've like often wondered about, because I have like, when I was younger, I was never a libertarian exactly, but I have some like libertarianish sympathies. And one thing that I thought was that one advantage of having like a market-based system is that you just can't pull that kind of crap. You can't like it's harder to cancel people or to have some sort of like thought conformity or whatever because in a totalitarian system, you have like one actor at the top, the state. If they decide that you're bad, they can just ban you. Um, Whereas like that shouldn't be as possible in like a marketplace system because like nobody can ban you. It's like, okay, you can get fired. One place doesn't want to publish you, that you can go to another place or this or that. And if there's a market for it, you know. And one thing that, and I still think there's some truth to that, but one thing that I think was kind of weird, particularly about the Great Awakening or whatever you want to call that period is it was able to I mean, not to the same degree, but to a surprising degree, achieve a lot of the same results without, a like a government, just like crowdsourced. It was like crowdsourced totalitarianism or soft totalitarianism, how you wanted, where it's like no one's gonna come and put you in jail because you said like all lives matter or you wouldn't say Black Lives Matter or whatever, but you would like easily be, you could lose your job, be socially ostracized, get kicked off of various social media, other platforms, Airbnb. I know people who like Airbnb said you couldn't rent here anymore, just like weird stuff like that, which seemed to, at least for a small period, achieve like a, a level of conformity, right, that you would not expect. Now, it didn't last, we have, and maybe this is like my old beliefs about the advantage of like a free society kicking in, is that that can happen for a little while, but then people get tired of it, and when they do get tired of it, there's opportunity for backlash, whereas there wouldn't be, if you're under like a state-based system or whatever. But it's still, I mean, this is, I think, a phenomenon that I don't think is totally understood, is like how this worked, like how could you have um a like, instead of like a top down conformity system, like a bottom up conformity system.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so Ray Bradbury actually talked a little. I mean, the late Ray Bradbury, he wrote Fahrenheit 451 about these they're called firefighters or whatever. They burn books, and he had like a lot of different theories and like explanations for the book. It was written in the 50s. It came out in the 50s during the McCarthy hearings, but then he talked about political correctness. By the end of his life, Bradbury was conservative. I think he was a big fan of Reagan, whatever. One of his explanations though about Fahrenheit 451 was it shows how the people themselves can be driven to manias of
Right.
censoriousness, as opposed to 1984, which is a novel really that's focused on how the government, how like a totalitarian, authoritarian state, kind of like forces the people to be in line, as opposed to Brave New World, which is another. I feel like these certain dystopian near future books from the 20th century. They illustrate different aspects. Which Brave New World, which Rod talked about, it's a really soft authoritarianism insofar as, like, it's just, like,
Yeah.
focusing on, like, I mean, it's a little bit like state-imposed free love, free sex, free drugs, you
Right.
know?
Right.
And it's basically like you're totally hedonistic, and all you care about is your pleasure principle, and you just lose all sense of other values, concerns, and, you don't cause problems for the government when you're just, like, on
Right.
drugs, like, messed up all the time, not messed up, you know what I'm saying? Like, all
Yes.
you care about is your next hit, your next endorphin hit or your next dopamine rush. And
Yeah.
so I think that these aspects do come together in American society in certain ways. There is some government authoritarianism that was coming from the top. So let's talk about like Chick-fil-A, with the
Yes. Right.
awakening. Okay, so it's like Rahm Emanuel was going to use lawfare against Chick-fil-A from expanding to Chicago because Chick-fil-A, it's a Christian evangelical
Right.
family that owns it, and there were some issues related to comments that I think the founder made, but also maybe like are gay people comfortable at Chick-fil-A? Whatever. There's issues like that. That's like a top-down lawfare that is like driving cultural politics. But then like something like the Instagram blackout, that was just like bottom up. And so a lot of people just like get online and like decide to. And it was actually like a minority of Americans, like highly active, energized, left-wing millennial activists, I would say, that really formed the core of the populist brigades. It wasn't populist; it was like 10% of the population or something, but they're like very online and they're targeting people and they're making lists and they're checking it twice.
Yeah.
There's that aspect, and then I think there's another aspect which this is the kind of thing that Crunchy Cons and Rod's uh you know warnings about libertarianism, the free market, um it's just like the hedonistic, like McMansion loving, there. I mean, the issue is like if it was just the left, it wouldn't have been a problem. Part
Right.
of the problem is people who are quote conservative and right wing also got caught up in it, and partly it's because they didn't necessarily believe in some of the ridiculous things, but they wanted to keep their fancy house based on their high salary and
Right.
go on their vacations and all these things. And the capitalist, the market material incentives were being pulled away from them by people who, I mean, Dick Hanania has talked about this. There are these left-wing activists, they don't care about making money.
Right. Right.
They don't wanna, I mean, they're not grilling.
Yes.
They're not grilling.
Not at all.
They wanna, like, shape souls and shape minds and reshape society, whereas a lot of conservatives in the United States in particular, outside of, like, maybe, like, the church lady types that, have been, like, lambasted in popular culture over the last generation or 2, they just wanna be left alone to have their family, raise their family, grill, and then all of a sudden, all this stuff comes at them, and they don't know how to deal with it, in
Yeah.
terms of, like, what do I say? What do I do? Like, am I gonna lose my job? Like, these are real concerns, real people who don't talk about politics all the time, and their goal is just to, like, have a good 401k, have a good retirement, go on their vacations, like, live the normal life unbothered by other people.
Right. And I think, this is an interesting subject because, and this is something that Rod in the book, and it's true, talked about that. The book focuses a lot on dissidents, right? In communist countries, in Czechoslovakia or Russia or Poland or whatever. And there were people like that who just refused to go along. But most of the population was not like that, right? Most of the population, especially by the end, there were some true believers, but most people were not true believers, right? Like in their heart of hearts, they're like, the system kind of sucks. I don't really know. Like, why these slogans, like we want, like we got to have peace, but we're also invading Afghanistan or whatever. So they, probably in their heart of hearts, they didn't really believe it, but at the same time, they kind of went along with it, right? Because um, not doing so, I guess the idea is, look, if I speak up, it's going to be really hard on me. I'll lose my job, my family will be affected, other people like that, coworkers. And what am I going to accomplish out of it, right? Like that's the perspective I think of the majority of people. It's probably the perspective of a lot of people in 2020 who may or may not have been swept along, but thought, yeah, better to just like go along, get along. And of course, like from a position from a position of like moral integrity or courage or whatever. I've read a lot about the communist dissidents, and it's very hard not to admire them. I think they were very heroic. At the same time, if I were to ask myself, like, what role did the dissidents have in the fall of communism in the Soviet Union and in the Warsaw Pact and whatever? I have to say, if I'm being honest, it's very minimal. Like, I don't think, like, the reason why Václav Havel and the other guys were able to take over in 1989, it wasn't that they convinced like the populace to rise up or anything. It's just Gorbachev, decided, okay, we're not going to enforce, um, you know, a communist solidarity with our tanks anymore. And, various other things happened like that. And the system just kind of fell. And, I mean, maybe you could make an argument a little bit that dissidents played some role, but really, I don't think that's the main story. The main, whether you view it as like the Soviet Union, like whether it had to do with the United States and like Western powers outcompeting them or failures internally or whatever. I think easily you could imagine other circumstances where there were no dissidents, or the dissidents just got crushed, or the Soviet Union continues on. So it doesn't seem like they accomplished that much in that sense, right? Where so I think there's a sense in which the people who were like, well, just keep your head down and wait it out, were correct. Like maybe your life would be better off if you didn't do that. Now, from a moral perspective, it's a little bit different. And obviously there are some people who are just like that, where they just can't, this is, I think, one of the things that I get from reading a lot of the distance is there's just something about the way that they're hardwired where they just can't keep their mouth shut about it. And some people are like that, and I think that's good. In a free society, we need those people. In an unfree society, you also need those people. But it's not a utilitarian case exactly, if you know what I mean. So that's, I mean, I think that, that also, if you think about the lighter version of that we had here, I think you see the same phenomenon where, the people who kind of, were not willing to go along, right? Sometimes, it was by happenstance, they incautiously said something and then they were committed. And sometimes, it's just like Wes Yang, right? He's someone who's been beating the drum about like trans stuff, throughout the like whole period or whatever. And I don't know. I mean, I know Wes a little bit, and my sense is that, while of course he wants to have an impact, I think a lot of it is just like he can't help himself. It's like, okay, this is just like people are lying and doing horrible stuff to children or whatever all around me, and like even if I thought that I was doomed, which sometimes you talked about him and he will speak like he thinks that, the issue is doomed. It was like he was going to lose. His side was going to lose, but it didn't affect him. He was just like, I still got to speak about it. And I think some people, a lot of the heterodox people or dissidents or however you want to call it, they have an element of that just like in their nature where it's not that they think, oh, if I do this, then I can bring down the system. They hope that's true, but even if they can't, they're just like, well, I still gotta say what I think is true, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I was actually thinking, like, as you were saying that, this, like, reflex, so there's a show or documentary from 1996, I remember watching it in college, Revenge of the Nerds, and it's by the, PBS host Robert Cringely, his real name is Mark Stevens, and, he, like, commenter on tech and stuff, and so, it talked about, like, the rise of Microsoft and Apple and all this stuff, and, Steve Jobs had a lot of Steve Jobs had a lot of, sound bites in there, they interviewed Bill Gates, and one of the things was, like, Jobs', like, personality was okay, like, there's just something innate in him where he's just kind of a dick. So,
Right.
this is back when he was, like, not at Apple. This was at his time, like, away from Apple, and, he wanted to, like and he had said some really bad things about Microsoft and MS-DOS and, what they're
Mhm.
trying to do with Windows. Like, it's just, like, bad products, and he called him one time, and he's just like apparently, like, Gates was, like, somewhere and, like, he's like, "Yeah, we have a call," and he's like, "I'm kinda busy." He's like, "It's Steve Jobs." And Jake's like, "Okay, I'll take it." And, like, apparently, like, Jobs was like, Bill, I said some really harsh things, and, I just I wanna apologize because like, I know that you're trying hard, and even if I disagree." And, like, Gates was like, thank you, like, I really appreciate it because we just wanna make like, great software for everybody out there." And, like, Jobs, like, pausing, like, it's not great? It actually kinda sucks." Like, 'cause 'cause, like, it's really bad,
I
and, like, what you do is
tried.
really bad. So,
Yeah.
I mean, he obviously, like, was trying to mend fences, but at the end of the day,
Right.
he
He
couldn't
couldn't,
do it.
yeah, he was able
He
to
just,
pull it
like
off for
he had
90
to
seconds.
tell
Yeah.
Gates what he thought about
Right.
his software, which was that it was bad, and
Yes.
he
Yeah.
shouldn't be making this bad software, which is, like okay, like, of all the things to die on, that's kinda weird, you know?
Right.
But,
Right.
Jobs
Yeah.
was also one of those guys who famously, like, would ask you in the elevator what you did, and if you couldn't explain it well, he'd just, like, fire you right there, right?
Right.
Like, that's a real thing, and he's
Yeah.
also, like, very, like, egotistical, like, he shows up back at Apple and, the cafet he's a vegetarian, so he just makes the cafeteria all vegetarian, you know?
Right.
Just
Right.
this is to say that some people who are truth tellers are not always they're not, like, kind, nice people a lot of the
Correct.
time.
Yes. Right.
They
Right.
just, like, have, a reflex, I mean, sometimes they're autistic, sometimes their personality is just in a certain way, and, yeah, and, like, one thing about dissidents, actually, in the former Soviet Union, one thing I remember reading once was, um, so after the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991 and stuff like that, a lot of people who had been communist apparatchiks, decided to, turn a new leaf, like, a lot of them started going to church, going to
Right.
Orthodox church.
Yeah.
And, a lot of the dissidents, like, it was like a weird demographic pattern. A lot of the dissidents were Jews who had been persecuted, but a lot of these Jews, not most of them maybe, but a significant minority, because they were very secular. Like, Soviet Jews were extremely
Right.
secular.
Yeah.
Some of them became Orthodox Christians. And so they were being persecuted for being Jews, and then they were being persecuted for being Christians, and they're
Right.
pretty serious Christians, and, like, these former Jewish Christians, like, in 92, 93, they started sitting next to people in the church pews who had persecuted them for
Right.
being
Yeah.
Christian, and they're
Right.
just like, "What's going on here?" Like, they're, like, literally, like, people who had, like, put them in prison, and who
Uh-huh.
was like, "Of course you have to be an atheist because, that is the advanced way,"
Right.
and, now they're, like, they're taking whatever, it's not m like, the Orthodox have, like, the wine, like, they're in the liturgy, right? They take
Correct. Yes. Really, they do it by intinction, where they have the bread is on like a spoon and they dip it into the wine and then serve it to you, as opposed.
okay, okay. But yeah, my point there is, the nomenclatura or the intelligentsia,
Yeah.
whatever, they know what time it is. And so
Right.
when after communism fell, it's like,
Right.
well, this is the way and that's how most people are. I remember just, like, unrelated, when I lived in Eastern Oregon, like, there's, like, very few non-whites, and one of the there's a Cambodian family, and, they had the mom had been through the Khmer Rouge period, actually, but anyway, neither here nor there, so sometimes we talk to them, and, they used to have, like, these, like, Buddhist, like, altars in the living room type of thing, like, whatever, like, it didn't really matter. My parents were Muslim, so they didn't really care, but Then one day we went over and there was, like, a Christian cross,
Right, right,
and we were just like and my mom was like, "Oh, so you're Christian now? Like, you don't believe in Buddha?" And she's like, "Well, in Cambodia, people are Buddhist, but here in America, people are
right,
Christian." And my
right.
mom was like, "Yeah, but, like, I mean, do you so you believe in Jesus now?" And, like, she just repeated what she said.
Right, yeah, we're in America
So
now.
yeah, so it was just that was her attitude. My point there is, like, a lot of people, that's how they are, and so, and that's why you should worry about soft totalitarianism, and I think we saw it. We saw it with our
Yes.
friends and acquaintances, things like people who changed or kinda tacked this way or that way,
Yeah,
and, yeah, I mean, so I think, like, Rod got some pointed questions from students, like, they're all freshmen because UATX is first
right.
year, and they're like, "Well,
Very,
how."
very intense and nerdy,
Yeah, 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 they were asking, like, they were asking multiple questions, they should like, the moderator
right,
there should have been a moderator to, like, get them to one, but anyway, they were asking, like, pointed questions, but the reality is if you're our age Rod's a little older, but we're all Gen X,
yeah,
you have seen things that, you know, I mean, will make you wonder about humanity and, like,
right,
I sometimes it's weird, like, when I was I've told this story before, when I was in high school, a very conservative area, there was an acquaintance of mine, we weren't friends, but he was talking about how he wanted to, like, murder the one, like, out obviously gay
right,
kid in our high school, like, at a party, like, he's like I think he was a little drunk, but he was, like, talking about, like, murdering him, like, it was just like, "Go fuck like, kill him right now," and
yeah,
I was just like, "Hey, this is, like, weird, can you just, like, not talk about this? This is, like, not funny," and everyone else was just like, "Whatever," and, like, I kinda got into an argument, he got belligerent, so I remember that. I was just like, "Whoa, like, this is, like, fucked up." Well, what was that what was the case? The gay rights case.
Burgerfeld,
Yeah, when that passed, like, we're not friends on Facebook, but we have mutuals, and so I saw a Facebook message where he's like, "I'm proud" that same guy is, "I'm proud to be American now." You
yeah,
know? So I don't know if that was, like, a heartfelt change, but, he lives in Portland, Oregon now, etcetera, etcetera, and I've seen milder versions of this where a lot of people that were extremely reflexively, quote, "conservative" now live in Portland, Oregon, and I see their Facebook, and it's like they're pretty, like, normal liberals.
yeah,
These are people that just, they go with the temperature of the water they're in. That's most people, And we just
right,
have to understand that and accept that, and that's why warnings of, yeah, they might seem overwrought, but culture can change extremely fast,
yes,
um, if you have, like, a really motivated group of people who wanna change the culture, right?
right,
So, I mean, look at the Iranian Revolution, which was basically a communist, religious conservative alliance, against, like, kinda center-right monarchy. And then they ended up killing all the communists after. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
right, yeah, yeah,
the communists thought that they could control them, to paraphrase, Cabaret. The communists thought that they could control these, like, rubes, and the rubes took over and transformed the culture, and, the reality is, like, the culture of the rural areas and the bazaar was always pretty conservative, we just didn't see it. There are all these pictures, like, this is, like, Iranian women before the revolution and, but those were always upper class people, but now they just imposed on the upper class, whatever, like, values they had. It changed within, like, 2 years. There were people There's, like, some woman who was, she was, I just, like, was looking up, like, random things on Wikipedia. She was Minister of the Health or something at some point in the '70s, and she was executed because, she just refused to wear a hijab. And, like, you
right,
can't and she
right,
was, like, a big government official, so it was kind of one of those things where, well, we can't just, like, let this pass, like,
yeah,
she's
right,
basically,
right,
like, rubbing in our faces that she doesn't believe in our values, so we just gotta execute her. So she was executed for that. That's pretty harsh, like, shit happens really quickly. And Iran had, like, some authoritarianism in the '70s, but it was very, very milk toast compared to what happened, right? So, Rod is in Budapest right now, and, he's in Hungary, which has, like, a form of populist democracy, I have a Hungarian American friend here who goes back to Hungary all the time. Orban's very popular, like, the
yeah,
people want what he's providing, and, we recently had a thing with the Doge where, they cut US aid, and then all of a sudden, all of the like, Matt Welch, libertarian commentator, I heard him on a podcast, he's like, "Wait a second, why are these opposition, like, media organs totally dependent on American money?" You
right,
know?
right,
It's
yeah.
because, like, they don't have
There's
like,
no
Hungary yeah, yeah.
Hungary. I mean, Hungary. Like, not only is Orban popular, but the opposition is divided. But the opposition is divided between like the left or the liberals or whatever, and then there's a like huge far right, anti-gypsy, anti-Semitic uh, party, which is even bigger, I think, than the liberals in terms of the population or whatever. So it's kind of weird because he represents the center ground, and um, but yeah, I mean that's kind of the way that it goes with different places are different, I guess. But
Well, I mean, so there's a rise of, like, the BJP. So basically, like, maybe we don't need to go into it, but, like,
yeah,
there's a rise of, like, conservative, not like far right, but, like, conservative populist parties across the
right,
world, and our media hates them. But the reality is they're pretty popular because they really reflect the will of the people. Like, so concretely, India was dominated for most of the post-World War II period by a catch-all left-wing party, where the leadership, the original leadership under Nehru, were trained as Fabian. They were Fabian socialists.
yeah, right,
They were not really culturally totally Indian, a lot of them. Some of them were, but a lot of them were not. And that like persisted for a long time because like, people just vote for what they know. And that created like a certain culture that was out of step with the rest of the country. So for example, the Congress Party is quote secular and all this stuff. But like I knew like Indian immigrants in the US and like they fucking hated Muslims. Like a
right,
lot,
right. Yeah,
But they
I mean,
kept voting for the Congress Party, which had like, Congress appointed Muslim presidents and all this stuff. So what just happened with the BJP is just like the reality of the fact that people hate each other just kind of came to the surface, and the BJP is like a little bit more open about it, like considerably more open. Whereas
yeah,
like Modi is like a devout Hindu, and like he will like engage with Muslim politicians, but like there's certain things he's not going to do because like he doesn't agree with Islam. Just like if you're an evangelical Christian, you'll engage with some like Jewish or Hindu or Muslim, but like you're not going to like some evangelical Christians would not participate in certain ceremonies because like that seems to be countenance a religion that they think is wrong, right? Which like can be a little rude as a politician, but it actually makes like sense. So I don't think like Modi's as like when I heard things like that, oh my god, like he refused to do this one thing, and I'm like, he's a Hindu. Right?
right,
He doesn't wanna, like, do something that makes it seem like, there's one God and you should not have idol worship and everyone else is, like, going to hell. Like, that's why he didn't do that?
yeah,
Like, there's, like, an internal logic, and it's like people have views, they have beliefs that are separate from just, like, utility maximization and all that stuff. Like, there is this aspect where, they think, like, "Oh, economics is all that matters," but, I personally, like, as people on this podcast know, like, I do think economics matters a lot and, like,
yeah,
material prosperity and all that stuff, but you could take it too far. I mean, at the end of the day, economics and, like, the good life serve, like, whatever values you have, not the other way around, at
right,
least for most people.
right. Yeah. One other thing I would say I want to say about the dissident as a type or whatnot, and this is true in the Eastern Bloc dissidents. Some people were Catholic or Orthodox, religious Jew or whatever. But others were atheists, and then even some of them were communists, like Trotskyists or various dissident type of communist branch or whatever. And where while you had other people who had the same belief system, who were not like that, right? And my experience is I've lived long enough. You see people go through political transformations. As you say, sometimes they start out they're conservative and then become liberal or left wing. Sometimes it goes the other way, and for the most part, there are exceptions, but for the most part, if someone has a radical political transformation, their temperament does not change. Their personality and character, those things do not change. They're the same. If someone was an asshole, commie, like tanky or whatever, and then he becomes like super MAGA or whatnot, he's still an ass. He's still going to be an asshole, right? Like, this is just my experience. And if someone's like a nice guy, really nice, thoughtful, considerate left wing guy, and he becomes, super MAGA, he's going to be still a nice, thoughtful, considerate guy.
Nice guy MAGA, nice guy
Like
MAGA.
MAGA, yeah, or vice versa. Like whatever polls you want to uh you want to attribute it to. So I think I do obviously I do think Jesus can change your life or whatever, right? I have seen cases of that, particularly for people. I mean, this is not a political thing, but like other aspects of your life, like quit drinking or others, you know. So I don't think that I'm not saying that your belief system can't change you, you know. And occasionally there are people who they switch their politics and get really mean. Okay, that I have seen that too. But for the most part, I just think that stuff is it's orthogonal. And so this is I think this helps explain why dissidents came from all sorts of different political and religious belief systems and backgrounds or whatever. Um, because on some like it's kind of weird because you would think it should matter a lot to you, but to some extent, like the ideas that people believe or whatever, it has there's a kind of unreality about it, you know, in terms of like how people behave, right? Um, I mean, even people, you know, uh, you even like know. I mean, this is probably more common with like my parents or even my grandparents' generation, but you have people who they subscribe to like some sort of racist ideology, right? But in their personal dealings with members of other races, they're, you know, courteous and polite and even helpful, you know, the go out of their way to help
Yeah.
people in various situations, right? Whereas you could also have people who, you know, and this I think this continues to be true today, who, you know, they are anti-racist, you know, they got the signs, you know, they believe all the things, and then you know, they encounter a black conservative and the way they start talking, you know, just like, whoa, yeah, right. So I, you know, I think there's something just about people and their character, temperament, personality, or whatever that is it's a core of them that is going to be true regard
Yeah.
regardless of what they're yeah.
Moving this back to Rod Dreher, actually, I think Rod is kind of illustration of this. Like he was like an atheist liberal for a while in his like young adulthood.
Yeah.
A lot of this was just driven by his alienation from small town, small like conservative small town. And like, his family, they're not like super political. The reason like for example, one of the things that Rod did that pissed his sister off and his dad is that, he became Catholic and he wasn't
Right.
Methodist like they all. It's not because they have, like, a deep belief that Catholicism is wrong and Catholics are going to hell or anything. It's just because like, they're Methodist. They've always been Methodist from when they can remember. Like, so
Right.
why do you have to, like, go, like, join some weird and then he became Orthodox, and they're just like, "What the hell?"
Yeah.
You know? So, I mean, in a way, like, Rod is, he has high openness. He has high
Uh-huh. Yes.
openness,
Yeah. Yeah.
he's on the neurotic side. There's things about his personality that are actually a little bit not a little bit, a lot out of step with a lot of conservatives, that are more, like, down the line, just right-wing conservative, whatever, but they don't have to, like, create an ideology about it. That's just who they are. They live in the same small town, they go to the same church, they get married, they have kids, and they do the same thing that they've been doing for many, many generations. That is not Rod Dreher, right?
Right.
And so
Yeah.
that is been an issue in his life, personally, that he's admitted, but also is some of the things that people have said about him, and they're like, "Yeah, this guy's weird," and some of the controversies that he gets involved in. I do have to, I think, deal with the fact that, like, Rod is pushing the edge, in terms of, like, what his fixations are. I do have to say, I used to have a saying, and I don't say it anymore after what happened over the last 5 years, "You never go full Rod Dreher," okay? And, like, what I would say, like, Josiah knows this, is like, I mean, some of the crap that Rod posted on his blog about, like, sexual perversion
Yes.
was, like,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was so prurient that I was just like, it would be, like, one of those things where you, like, page down really fast because like, I mean, there are things on his blog that I have not read because
Uh,
he's like Rod is basically his attitude is like, "I'm gonna post this and you're gonna read this because you wanna know how bad the," and I'm just like, "No, I don't." Like, I'll just trust you, okay? I'll trust you, bro, you know? But when he does things like that, I think a lot of conservatives are like, "What the hell? Like, how do you know why are you going into these parts of the internet where you're like you're it's like, there are people who worry that, like, you engage with, say, perversion enough, you will become a pervert,
right.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
I don't think that's true with Rod at all, actually, from everything that I know, and we met him, like, no, he actually just gets fixated on these things, and he's like, "Everyone needs to know, okay?
Right. Yeah.
Everyone needs to
Yeah.
know,
Yes.
about" well, I'm not gonna say what, okay? But
Right.
you guys, I can leave it to your imagination. But there are things like one time, I was talking to my wife and telling her about like a gay pride parade in Brazil. She's like, "How do you know these things? Where are you finding this horrible stuff?" And I was just like, "This conservative blog." I No, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. There are a lot of things that I know about the gay lifestyle that I know from Rod.
Right.
Because it's like for most of us, it's a don't ask, don't tell
People don't
policy.
talk about it. Yeah, right, right.
No, I mean,
Okay.
you don't wanna know, and, like, so you don't ask, but, like, Rod's like, "This is bad, and you need to know why," and I'm just like, I mean, maybe you're right, bro, but, like, man, it's just like, you
Yeah.
know
I think it probably is good that there are people like that because otherwise people just forget they don't know, and then
Oh,
suddenly
yeah, it was like during, that was that article in the New York, it wasn't the New York Times or the Atlantic, it was somewhere where the Republicans were having a hard time convincing people,
right, yeah,
like, regular voters what the Democrats really believed about the gender stuff because they were like, "This is crazy. There's no way this is true. This is obviously Republican propaganda."
right.
Which, like, I actually like, so I have a friend, he actually ran for Congress in 2010, he lost, Democrat, moderate Democrat, I would say, and I remember talking to him about Black Lives Matter in, like, 2019, and I was like, "They're communists, they oppose, like, the nuclear family," and he was like, "Okay, like, Razib, like, you're being crazy," and I, like, actually, like, sent him
Go to
the link
but
and the screenshot, and he was like, "Oh, whoa." He was like he was totally shocked,
Yes,
you know?
right.
So it's 'cause most people don't know how radical some of these people are. Yeah, so, I guess, like, let's talk about something else right now, and then I wanna talk about Canada because I actually met Maxime, he's a dude, Bernier, actually
Yes,
this week.
right,
He took it through, he was on Alex Jones' podcast, and we had some conversations, but, let's talk about, I don't know how you feel, I'm not a big fan of Trump's tariff policy and stuff like that.
yeah,
I'm not a big fan of, like, let's, like, fuck with the economy so the interest rates go d I don't know, like, this is
right.
I'm trying to is it you have a saying, Josiah, you have a saying, like, "My plan" I generally oppose plans to lose so that we can win, you
Yes,
know?
right, yes, yes,
Yeah, so I do feel like, I'm not like and a lot of people I've talked to a lot of people privately who, like, support Trump. Like, I support all his DEI stuff, a lot of the stuff he's doing
right,
domestically, I do kinda support. His international stuff, though, okay, look, I'm not, like, a total, like, blob supporter, I'm not a neocon at all, I have, like, isolationist tendencies, but, the volatility is out of control, the tariffs, like, seem wrong-headed. I'm like, I don't care if you have a reason why it's good that eggs prices are high,
right.
all this is like, it seems, like, counterproductive and dumb, and, like, I think it's not gonna be great by the end of the summer if we continue this, and, yeah, I mean, I don't know, just I don't have any defense of this except, like, "Oh, well, it's a negotiating," but it's like, if you do too many volatile things over and over again, then people stop paying attention. So, anyway.
Right. Yeah. One thing that I find frustrating is and I have pretty normie views on tariffs. I think I kind of accept the like economic case against them. I do think that I'm open to them being justified sometimes for like non-economic or geopolitical reasons, so
Yeah, I gotta say, I'll be, like, very clear here, the China tariffs, we need to do something about China, I get that.
right.
Canada tariffs, like,
Yeah,
what the fuck?
what's the so like it's sort of a spectrum, so I mean Colombia says they're not going to take back, migrants that we're deporting to there and Trump threatens tariffs and then they back down. That seems great. China, you want to tariff China. I mean, there's like geopolitical things on that. It's like, okay, I can get on board. Mexico, you want to tariff like Mexico. It's like, well, I mean, maybe I get, and then to Canada, I don't know, like, what does it make sense? And one thing that I find kind of frustrating is, there are now, I mean, I know a lot of like really smart, like, MAGA people, Trump booster people, right? Which I think is good. But one thing that I find kind of annoying is there is a tendency, like, whenever Trump does something, they'll try and like backfill some rationale. And these are smart, creative people, so they'll come up with something, and it won't. Sometimes it's like I don't think that Trump is. imposing tariffs on Canada because they haven't done enough to help us against the, pirates in keeping the Suez Canal open or what, So sometimes it's like weird, but I mean, I don't know. I don't see the logic of it, particularly with Canada and even really with Mexico. Because uh there are a lot of things where it would be useful to have cooperation, like we need cooperation with Mexico, on like border stuff, on drugs or whatever. And then with like Canada, um, we get a lot of oil from Canada that we refine and then export, and there's other, so it's like there's real hardships that come from a lot of this stuff, and I don't totally see the point of it. And then beyond that, with Canada, Trump keeps talking about making them the 51st state or whatever. And like, A, that's never going to happen. B, it would actually be a pretty bad idea if we made Canada the 51st state, because like that's 40 million, new American voters, and they're going to be very left of center. So like how I don't know, like what is your plan, even if they're
Yeah,
all
yeah,
one
so I
state?
I I I okay, I do want to annex Canada, but, like, my idea is for it to be a
No,
territory, so they don't
yes.
have
Yeah,
voting rights. I do think they
right.
should be allowed to work in the United States,
Right,
but they
right.
don't vote, and this is my plan, as you know, for, like, Airstrip 1 and Airstrip 2.
Yes, that's
Like,
right.
Britain and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Australia.
You want your English gardener or whatever. We've talked about
Yeah, 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 we gotta do it. So I actually, like, support some of his sentiment because, in a way, it doesn't we need a closer relationship with English-speaking Canada. Let's just put it in a very generic,
that. Yeah.
vague way. What he's trying to do is force it through these methods that, like, in the art of the deal, like his negotiation, playing hardball. It
I mean,
doesn't seem like it's working, it seems like it's having the opposite effect.
yeah, I mean, it's not clear to me, does Trump actually like does he actually have a plan to incorporate Canada? It's not, unlike Greenland, there's a lot of other stuff. Like the thing seems to be a post-election, you know, idea, and it makes so little sense to me. Like, okay, in like a broad 30,000 foot view, you know, does it make sense to have two countries or have us like a single country? It's probably would be better for Canada, economically, other stuff. So you can make that case, but politically, it doesn't seem like a good idea. It doesn't seem like it seems like a non-starter, and mostly it just seems like it's pissing people off for no reason. You know, they're having an election in Canada this fall in October, and the Liberals were on track to just be wiped out. I think one projection was that they were going to get 6 seats or something in their legislature, and some of that, that they got rid of Justin Trudeau. That was going to inevitably help them bounce back a little bit. But now you look at the polling, and it's basically tied. The Liberals are even ahead a little bit, and it's pretty clear just looking at the timelines that a lot of that is a reaction to Trump. They view his actions as like hostile, and the Conservative Party in Canada is like too closely aligned with Trump, not
Yeah.
oppositional enough, So
But it's an untenable position.
right, it's yeah,
They have to defend Canadian nationalism against Trump, but
right.
if they also, like, don't wanna seem like I mean, yeah,
You don't want to seem
they're in an untenable position. Like, they're right wing in Canada.
Caucadian, Canuck.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
let just really quickly, Poly Market is giving right now, Mark Carney, the milquetoast liberal, lefty guy, not left, but, but whatever, 59%, probability, I guess, and Pure P, yeah, they're giving him 42%. So now, what
yeah.
the
It
hell?
is. That's
He's a
right.
favorite, and I think the election is gonna happen at the end of April or something? I don't know.
No, it's in October, I believe. I
October?
don't
Okay.
think it happens until
But they're
October.
gonna call it they're gonna set the date, I think, in
Right.
April.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, Poly Market also has a market on will Jesus come back in 2025? Last time I checked, it's 3%. So, you should be thinking about, I mean, 3%,
Yeah, but, like, if
not
Jesus
that
comes
high.
back and, like, you win, I mean, I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, it seems like if that were really 3%, it should be affecting people's other trades, too. Although I guess yeah, if he comes back, maybe like is the money going to be useful for anything? I don't know. I don't know. Um but yeah, so they got a lot of markets there. So yeah, I mean, Trump, I don't know that he necessarily cares who I mean he who governs Canada. I don't think he has the same in the way that like Musk or JD Vance or other people um care about like not, boosting right-wing conservative parties in
Hello?
other countries. Trump,
Uh,
maybe he just doesn't care if the liberals continue to rule Canada. He just doesn't care. But it doesn't seem like that would be helpful. Certainly, like whatever he wants from Canada, a conservative government would be more accommodating, I think, than the liberals. So I don't know. It just
okay, so, like, I'm just like, it's not a big complaint, like, I mean, I think we like, I have, I mean, actually, like, so I have, uh, got this. I'm not, like, super I'm not, like, super political, but, look, I got this, okay? I got this from a dear friend,
all right,
shall we
very
say,
good. Yeah,
who got
yeah,
it for me, but, I have the so my friend actually Jonathan Anomaly was over, and he was, like, surprised at it because I'm not very partisan political guy,
right.
and I was like, "Whatever." I mean, I'm excited about some of the things, that Trump is doing with DEI, like, and, like, the Department of Education, all of this domestic a lot of the domestic stuff, I'm like, I'm there. I'm
Yes.
so, like, excited, and you can just do things. I'm a little bit more ambivalent on how Doge is working out, but I know that there's some good people in Doge, so I don't know.
Yeah.
What the foreign policy international stuff is just like and so I'm just expressing honest opinions, and then we have friends, and it's like they're going full magatard, okay?
Right.
And, like, I am kind of frustrated by it because, like, you are capable of thinking, aren't you? I mean, I don't know.
Right. Right. Right.
Does that make sense? I mean, like,
Yes.
I get it, like, if you're not, like, a super political person, I actually think it's okay to just be like, "Well, he's my leader," right? But there are some people who are supposedly, like, focused on politics and reading all the time, and it's just like, there's always a reason why this is, like, a genius move, And it's
Yes.
just like,
Right. Right.
really just shouldn't say anything because, like, you're I know what you're gonna say, you
Yeah.
know? There's no point.
Yeah.
It's like, in information theory, like, information is surprise. Like, there's just no information being provided. Like, you're like, "Oh, like, Trump has a reason why this. Trump has a reason why this." Like, Trump it's just like, whatever, like, no one cares. I don't know. I mean, I don't, we're not like look, if we were, like, in some Trump think tank or, like, some, Center for American Progress, I get it. You gotta stay on course, you gotta stay with the team. Not
Yeah.
everyone has to do that, and if you're a regular person, I don't really get it, so I'm just, like, complaining about this because, I'm my we were talking about personality types earlier,
Yeah.
and, like, my personality type is just, like, I just don't give a fuck. Like, I will just, like, say what I think,
Right.
and that, like, really annoys people. Like, they thought it was great. A lot of people thought it was great when I was, like, shitting all over the wokes, like, in very, like, harsh terms and stuff like that. Or, like, I say, like, I don't know, I say, like, "Stop being a faggot," or something, They're like, "Oh, yeah, based," and then I'm just like, "Okay, like, this just seems like, this tariff stuff seems retarded." They're like, "Bro, like, you need to just get with it." And I'm like, "No, I don't need to get with any fucking program." Like, if I think it's retarded, I'm gonna say it's retarded, And it's just like,
Yeah.
I don't know, like, I haven't really changed that much.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess my biggest worry, I don't like it. I think it's harmful. My biggest worry, I think a lot of people are maybe too confident that woke has been defeated, it's dead and buried, and certainly I mean, there has been a so-called vibe shift or whatnot, but that stuff is still around. And my worry is that this like tariff stuff, if the economy goes sideways or something else happens, that all that stuff can come back, and it will be seen as like the anti woke stuff is discredited by association. So I don't know. I don't really have like I don't have any power or control over it. So I guess we just have to see how the ride goes. But yeah, it does make me a little tetchy, especially when I look at my uh, Charles Schwab account too. That's
Yeah, yeah, and, I mean, you're doing just like people know, I mean, you're doing okay compared to the average American, I would say. I don't know, there are people who are much more on the margin, and that is why Trump won, okay? Like,
Right.
Let's get I think most people agree that the primary reason Kamala, I mean, like the woke stuff and all that mattered too. The lack of control of the border mattered too, but they
Mhm.
just never could confront the fact that they probably the American Recovery Act drove inflationary pressures, and they did the thing where it's like it's not happening, like it wasn't me, the Shaggy defense, like they were just
Right.
ignoring it,
Right.
transitory inflation, all this stuff. People are pissed. They're still pissed, you know. They're still pissed. Inflation was like not like 70s crazy, but it was something we had not seen for a generation. It was something we had not seen since the 1980s, like something like that. It was crazy. Just to like it shocked people. Anyway, that was the reality. Well, I mean, like these sorts of economic fluctuations, I understand that, especially people are in bubbles, they think like, oh, like, whatever, it's good. They don't want the wokes to come back. But if you can't like pay your rent, or if your like groceries are out of control,
Right.
you're gonna use whatever they them pronoun you're asked to.
Right.
I'm just being honest here. I think you know, when you don't have the economic stuff under control, you can lose control of the culture very quickly. I mean, you read a lot about like, the communist revolution and stuff in the Soviet Union. And so, I'd be
No.
curious about your opinion, but the reality is like the Bolsheviks, they enacted a program that the people didn't really want, but they arose in the context of a lack of authority, credibility, and competence of the czarist regime.
Yeah. Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, certainly the czarist regime was totally discredited. Internal. It was similar. Russia in 1916, uh, under the czar, was similar to Russia in 1988 under communism, in that like almost nobody, at least in terms of, I'm sure there were like peasants, or there were a lot of peasants or whatever who still were on board or whatever. But in terms of like the educated intelligentsia or whatever, even the like aristocracy themselves, almost uniformly hostile. And so that created a big power vacuum. Um, the situation is, I think it's actually a little bit more complicated, because of course there were two revolutions. There's the February Revolution, where they overthrew the czar and replaced it with, like Lenin. The Bolsheviks were not involved in that. Lenin was in Switzerland, Stalin was in Siberia, Trotsky was in New York. Um, that was the people who took over were like a combination of like liberals and socialists, and they didn't get along or whatever. And it was only, um, when you get to like the October Revolution, where the communists are able to seize power from them, right? And again, they were able to do that because, um, there were the Kerensky government and the other people like that were not able to fill the power vacuum effectively, I would say. Um, so yeah, I think this is a big problem. I mean, I think usually when a regime um, falls, if it's not, most of the time it's like conquered by some outside state, right? But for it to fall internally, it basically has to fall from within, I would say. The existing regime has to be discredited. I think this was true with the French Revolution, right? In France, I think it was true.
Yeah, it's basically the way I would the analogy or the metaphor is like, it's like a piece of fruit that's rotted within and looks really
Right.
nice on the outside, and you just like poke and it's like, oh fuck, you
Yeah.
know?
Right. Right.
It's like the system is like totally sclerotic, and it just gets knocked over. Who chooses to knock it over and who knocks it over? That's actually like a lot more random, I think, than
Correct.
people think,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Right. Yeah. And you can have people. I mean, it's kind of amazing. Like people just come out of nowhere. Like who was Lenin? He was just like, Lenin was like the kind of guy who, like, now if you went to some like meetup, he would be off in the corner just like haranguing, people, or he would be like on a Twitter space with like 10 people, talking about this or that. Like Hitler was a homeless, was like homeless art school, drop.
He was a beat. He was a beat.
Yes, right, yeah, exactly, yeah, yeah. Um,
Weird. It's weird.
a lot of people were just like, and in the French Revolution, like, who was Napoleon? He was just like some junior officer. Uh,
Yeah, he was Italian speaking, Corsican from
right.
the minor nobility of, a very, very marginal so, I mean, also, but he was a genius, like, we know that he's extremely
Yes.
smart,
Yes.
but in a different time, he probably would've, like, had, like, just, like, a regular modest career because
Right.
there would've been ceilings for someone from his background.
Right.
But that revolutionary period opened up opportunities, and the man met the moment. Um Yeah, I mean, one thing that I will say also that we're talking about you just wanna grill, the reality is, like, if you just wanna grill and you want, like, a McMansion and, like, I don't know, let's say you have, like, a not a McMan, but a really nice place in, Westlake here in Austin, and you're a
Mhm.
CPA, and you have 3 kids, and, like, you just live a great life, and your biggest concern is your 401k and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
You're probably never gonna actually change history, though. You're gonna live a good life, but you're not gonna change history. The people who change history are just the weirdos, um,
Right.
that just, like, take the non-conventional path. 1,000 like, 999 probably, like actually, like, let's just say, like, 9,999,999 times out of, like, 10,000,000 these people, like, don't do anything, uh, substantial or, change history. Is that 1 out of 10,000,000, like Hitler or Stalin, the former priest, or like Lenin, like the cafe, bohemian intellectual, they meet their moment in history, and then it's just like, whatever. I mean, this is like, I'm in the startup world and stuff like that. It's the same. Like most founders don't do anything, and then some of them, and they're weird. They're usually like, they have some level of ADHD and super focus and fixation, and they're not the typical person that becomes the anesthesiologist. Just like
Right.
a certain personality type that's out there. So we've been talking for a while. I wanna get, like, something in the paywall. I wanna talk about housing, not because, like, we're both experts, but because we live in Austin, so we're experts on certain things. And, there's a new book out, I haven't read the whole thing yet, Abundance by Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson. I've seen some of the responses, and it's just, like, really interesting, to me because hope you enjoyed the podcast so far. To listen to the rest of it, please go to conversation.substack.com.
Two minds met on a summer's eve, each with truths they long believed. Words flowed like a winding stream as hours passed in deep debate. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. In listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. They spoke of justice, spoke of change, of history's weight and future's range. Their views at first seemed worlds apart, but patience bridged the divide. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. They spoke of justice, spoke of change, of history's weight and future's range. Their views at first seemed worlds apart, but patience bridged the divide. It's not about who's wrong or right, but understanding others' light. In civil discourse we can find ties that gently bind. And after all was said and done, they found a thread dawn broke soft on dewy grass. They smiled and shook hands at last. Two souls enriched by reason talk, united in respect. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. This folk song captures the essence of a long, thoughtful discussion between two public intellectuals. It emphasizes the power of patient listening, mutual respect, and the discovery of common ground. The gentle tone reflects the common understanding they reach after their debate. Would you like me to expand on any